in a big shiny shopping mall full of light, laughter, and music. A small girl named Lily stood near the entrance every evening. She looked out of place among the rich shoppers and fancy stores. Her clothes were old and faded, her shoes had holes, and her hair was tied in a loose ponytail. Still, there was something gentle in her eyes, something that made people look twice, though most didn't bother to smile back. They just walked past her, carrying their bags and coffees, too busy to notice the quiet girl who stood alone. Every day, Lily came to the same spot. She didn't come to beg or steal. She just wanted to listen. In the center of the mall stood a beautiful black piano. It was polished and shiny, its surface reflecting the lights from the ceiling. Sometimes a professional pianist would come and play, filling the air with songs that made the whole place feel magical. Other times, random people would try to play a tune, laughing when they hit the wrong keys. Lily always stood nearby, her eyes full of wonder. She loved the piano more than anything else in the world. To her, it wasn't just an instrument. It was a dream, a memory, and a piece of her heart. Long ago, before her mother died, they used to sit outside a small cafe where a pianist played every Sunday. Her mother would hum along, gently tapping Lily's fingers on her lap, as if they were dancing across invisible keys. "Someday you'll play too," her mother used to whisper. But those days ended too soon, and the only thing Lily had left was that memory. Now, in this mall filled with strangers, that piano reminded her of home, a home she no longer had. She lived in a tiny room near the train station with an old lady from the orphanage. She worked small jobs, delivering newspapers and cleaning steps. She earned just enough to buy food and sometimes a little candy for the younger kids who shared the shelter. Life was hard, but Lily never complained. She was quiet, polite, and always dreaming every evening. After finishing her chores, she would hurry to the mall before the guards closed the doors. She would sit on the floor near the piano and listen for hours. She could almost feel the music inside her. Every note made her heart beat faster. Every melody reminded her that the world could still be beautiful. She watched people's fingers move gracefully across the keys and tried to memorize each sound. Sometimes she would close her eyes and move her fingers in the air as if she was playing along. The mall workers saw her often and didn't mind. As long as she didn't touch anything, some smiled kindly at her. But most people ignored her completely. To them, she was just a poor girl wasting time in a place she didn't belong. They didn't know that inside that small, quiet body was a storm of dreams waiting to come alive. One evening, the mall was busier than usual. It was the weekend, and families filled the space. Children laughed, parents shopped, and the smell of food floated through the air. The piano stood there untouched as no one was playing it that day. Lily stood a few feet away, her heart aching. She wanted so badly to touch it just once. She had imagined it so many times, the feel of the cool keys under her fingertips, the sound that would come out if she played the tune her mother once hummed. But she was scared. She was scared of what people might say. She had seen how they looked at her before, the looks that said she didn't belong there. She was scared of being laughed at, or worse, thrown out by the guards. So she stayed where she was, clutching her backpack tightly. Her hands trembled as she whispered to herself. Maybe one day, as the minutes passed, she noticed something. The crowd had started to thin, and fewer people were around. The piano was still sitting quietly, shining under the lights for the first time. Lily felt like it was calling her. Her heart began to race. The world around her seemed to disappear. All the noise, all the laughter, all the fear faded away. There was only her and the piano. She took one small step forward, then another. Her shoes made soft sounds on the marble floor. A cleaner passing by glanced at her but didn't stop her. Her hands were sweating, but she couldn't turn back now. She reached the piano and stood beside it, up close for the very first time. It was even more beautiful than she had imagined. She could see her own reflection in its glossy surface, a small girl with tired eyes but a spark of courage shining in them. She slowly reached out and touched the edge of the piano. Her fingertips brushed against the smooth wood. It felt warm, almost alive. She smiled softly, whispering, "Hi there," as if the piano could hear her. For a moment it felt like time stood still. In that silent moment, she wasn't the poor orphan girl anymore. She was just Lily, a girl who loved music more than anything. But just as she was about to press her first key, a group of teenagers walked by, laughing loudly. One of them pointed at her and said, "Hey, look, that girl's gonna play. Let's see if she even knows what a piano is." The others laughed, and Lily froze, her heart sank. Her dream moment was turning into a nightmare. She quickly pulled her hand back and looked down. Afraid to meet their eyes, the laughter echoed in her ears. Still, even through the embarrassment, she didn't walk away. Something inside her refused to give up. She stood there quietly, her eyes fixed on the piano again. She knew she didn't belong in this shiny world. Not yet. But deep down, she also knew that music didn't care where you came from. All it needed was someone brave enough to play it. And that was the day Lily promised herself that no matter what people said, she would one day sit at that piano, and when she did, the whole world would finally hear what her heart had been trying to say all along. The next day, Lily stood at the edge of the mall again. The cold air brushed against her face as she looked at the shiny black piano in the middle of the hall. It looked almost like it was waiting for her. The memory of yesterday's laughter still echoed in her head. Those teenagers' voices had followed her even in her dreams. They had mocked her, called her names, and laughed like she was nothing. But deep inside, she knew she couldn't let that be the end. Something stronger was building inside her, a mix of hurt and courage. As she watched people walk by, Lily saw a little boy tugging at his mother's hand, pointing excitedly at the piano. "Mommy, can I play?" he said. The mother smiled and said no, gently pulling him away. That small moment made Lily's heart ache again, because she had once been that child, full of curiosity and music, but now she was just a girl who everyone ignored. She looked down at her hands, small and rough from cleaning steps and carrying papers, and whispered to herself, "Maybe today." The mall was noisy again, filled with chatter, footsteps, and the sound of shopping bags rustling. People walked past her without a glance, but this time Lily didn't care. She had made a decision, her heart was pounding. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She walked slowly toward the piano, her shoes tapping softly on the shiny floor. A few people noticed her. The same old security guard raised an eyebrow, remembering her from before. He didn't say anything yet, but he kept watching. Lily reached the piano and stood still for a few seconds. The air around her felt heavier. She could feel the stares from nearby shoppers, some curious, some amused. A group of teenagers leaned against the railing of the second floor, pointing down and whispering. One of them chuckled loudly. "Oh no, she's back again." His friend laughed. "Maybe she'll play us a song from the trash can." The words cut through Lily like a knife, but she didn't move. She sat down on the piano bench slowly. Her feet barely touched the floor. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. She had never felt something so powerful. The cool touch of the keys, the smell of the polished wood, the soft light reflecting off the surface. It was like sitting in front of magic, and yet around her, there were only whispers and laughter. Someone took out a phone, ready to record her embarrassment. They were expecting her to fail, but Lily didn't hear them anymore. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes in her mind. She could see her mother's face again, smiling at her under the warm sunlight. Her mother's voice whispered gently, "Music doesn't come from fingers, Lily. It comes from the heart." Lily felt her chest tighten, and when she opened her eyes again, something inside her changed. Her fingers pressed down on the first key. The sound echoed through the mall, soft, shaky, but real. A few people turned to look, expecting chaos, expecting noise, but instead, another note followed and another, until a melody began to form. It wasn't a song anyone had heard before. It was something she had created from her heart. A tune built from memory and love. The laughter stopped. The teenagers stared in confusion. The shoppers paused. A woman who had been scrolling on her phone looked up. The security guard froze mid-step. Lily's music filled the air like a gentle wave. Each note seemed to touch something inside everyone who listened. It was sad, but beautiful. Like the sound of someone remembering a lost dream, Lily's body moved with the rhythm. Her fingers, though untrained, moved gracefully across the keys. Her eyes were closed again, lost in the music. She didn't care who was watching. She didn't care who had mocked her. The mall disappeared in that moment. There was only her and the piano. The melody grew stronger. Faster, full of emotion, people began to gather. Forming a small crowd, phones were out, but this time, they weren't recording to laugh. They were recording in awe. Some people whispered, "Who is she?" Others just stood still, unable to speak. Even the teenagers who had made fun of her before were silent now. One of them whispered, "She's actually amazing," but no one replied, they just watched. When Lily reached the final part of her song, she slowed down. Her hands shook slightly as she played the last few notes, soft and sweet like a lullaby, and when the final key was pressed, silence filled them all. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Even Lily didn't open her eyes. She was scared. Scared that when she did, the laughter would return, but instead, the silence was broken by clapping, soft at first, then louder and louder. People were cheering, smiling, even wiping away tears. The sound of applause echoed through the hall, bouncing off the walls like music itself. Lily opened her eyes in disbelief. Her hands were still resting on the keys, and she could see faces smiling at her, not mocking her, but admiring her. The same teenagers who had laughed at her stood frozen. Embarrassed, one of them lowered his phone and said quietly, "I didn't know she could play like that." The security guard smiled for the first time, nodding at her as if to say, "You did good." "Kid," Lily stood up slowly, still dazed. She didn't know what to do. People started to gather closer, some dropping coins and small bills near the piano. Others just smiled warmly. A woman came forward and said, "That was beautiful." "Sweetie, what's your name?" Lily blinked, unsure if she should answer. Her voice was small when she finally said, "Lily." The woman nodded and said softly, "Don't ever stop playing, Lily. You have a gift." And at that moment, something inside Lily lit up like a flame. For the first time in her life, people weren't laughing at her. They were listening. They were seeing her for who she really was. Not for her clothes, not for her past, but for her heart. As she walked away that evening, the piano tune still echoed in the air. The same teenagers watched her go, silent, ashamed, and Lily, with a small smile on her face, whispered to herself, "Mom, I did it." She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning, and the world had finally heard her voice through the music she played with her heart. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She lay on her small bed in the corner of the old shelter, staring at the cracked ceiling. Her heart was still racing from what had happened at the mall. The sound of applause echoed in her ears like a dream she didn't want to wake up from. She replayed every moment, the keys under her fingers, the faces turning from mockery to awe, the clapping that felt like thunder in her chest. For the first time in her life, she had been seen. But even with that joy, fear still whispered inside her. What if it was all a mistake? What if they only clapped out of surprise and would laugh at her next time? The world had not been kind to her before, and she knew how quickly kindness could turn cold. She turned on her side and hugged her backpack, the only thing she owned that truly felt hers. Inside it was a small folded note, the last thing her mother had written before she passed away. In shaky letters it read, "Never stop listening to your heart, because it sings louder than the world." Lily smiled softly, whispering, "I listened today, Mama," before drifting into a restless sleep. The next morning, she woke up before sunrise. Her hands itched to touch the piano again. It wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about feeling alive. She brushed her hair with her fingers, cleaned her worn shoes with a cloth, and left quietly while the others in the shelter still slept. The cold morning air bit at her skin, but her heart was warm. She didn't have breakfast, but she didn't feel hungry. All she could think about was the piano. When she reached the mall, the cleaning staff was still sweeping floors, and most shops were closed. The piano stood in its usual place, silent but proud. The lights above it glowed faintly, and for a moment she just stood there staring. She felt like she was meeting an old friend. Her reflection shimmered on its surface, a small girl with tired eyes but a brave heart. She walked up slowly and sat down again. Her fingers touched the keys, and she smiled. It felt right. She started to play softly, a gentle tune, something new. Her notes floated in the empty mall like whispers of a dream. Each sound was pure and full of emotion, echoing softly between the marble walls. But after a few minutes, the sound of footsteps broke her rhythm. She turned and saw the same security guard from yesterday. His face was serious this time. "Hey," he said firmly. "You can't be here this early. The mall isn't open yet." Lily froze. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I just wanted to play a little." The guard sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He wasn't angry, just tired. "You played well yesterday," he said. "People were talking about you, but rules are rules, kid. Come back when we open." Lily nodded quickly and stood up, clutching her backpack. "Thank you," she said softly and started to leave. But before she reached the door, she heard another voice. "Wait." A tall woman with curly hair and glasses walked toward them. She was carrying a folder and wearing a name tag that said Mall Events Coordinator. "Is this the girl?" she asked the guard. "Yeah," he replied. "The one who played yesterday?" The woman smiled kindly at Lily. "You caused quite a scene, young lady," she said. "In a good way. People are still talking about you on social media. Someone recorded your performance, and it's spreading fast." Lily blinked, confused. "Spreading?" "Yes," the woman said, chuckling. "You're kind of famous now, dear. We'd like to invite you to perform officially during our weekend show. Would you like that?" For a moment, Lily couldn't speak. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Famous? Officially? Those words didn't sound real. She had never even thought she could be part of something like that. I don't know what to say," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "Just say yes," the woman smiled. "You have a gift, Lily. People need to hear it." Lily nodded slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Okay," she said, almost like a question. "I'll do it." The woman clapped her hands lightly. "Wonderful. Come back tomorrow afternoon for a short rehearsal. We'll have a piano ready for you, and don't worry. This time, no one will laugh." As the woman walked away, the guard gave Lily a little wink. "Looks like you're moving up in the world." "Kid?" he said. Lily stood still for a moment. Feeling like her heart might burst, she whispered softly, "Mama, I'm really going to play." Her hands trembled again. Not from fear this time, but from excitement. That evening, when she returned to the shelter, she told the old lady who ran the place about the invitation. The woman's eyes widened in surprise. "You're going to play in front of everyone?" she asked. Lily nodded shyly. "Yes, at the mall." The woman smiled. "Then you'd better practice, dear. Make them remember you." The next day, Lily arrived early for rehearsal. The piano on the small stage looked even more beautiful than before. The mall workers were setting up chairs, and a few people watched her curiously. When she sat down and placed her fingers on the keys, she took a deep breath. She wasn't nervous this time. She felt ready. As she played, the event coordinator listened from afar, amazed by how much emotion came from such a small girl. There were no fancy techniques, no formal training, but her music had a heartbeat. It told a story that words could not. When she finished, the woman approached her, eyes glistening. "That was perfect," she said softly. "You're going to touch many hearts tomorrow." Lily smiled, her face glowing with happiness. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. The same girl who had been laughed at for touching a piano was now being invited to play for a crowd. That night, as she lay in bed, she whispered to herself, "They'll hear me again, Mama," and in her dreams, the notes danced like stars, bright and endless. Tomorrow would be the biggest day of her life. But she didn't know yet. It would also be the day everything changed forever. The next day, the mall was brighter than ever. The lights shimmered from every corner, and the scent of coffee and perfume filled the air. Crowds moved in and out, laughing, shopping, living their perfect lives. But in the middle of all that noise sat one small girl, Lily, in front of the same black piano that had once been the reason for her embarrassment. This time she wasn't sneaking or hiding. There was a small banner hanging above that said, "Weekend Showcase featuring Lily, the miracle pianist." Her hands were sweating, and her heart felt like it was beating in her throat. She could see dozens of chairs arranged before her, already filled with curious faces. Some were strangers. Some were workers from the mall who had seen her before. Even the teenagers who had laughed at her were standing at the back, pretending they weren't interested, but their eyes stayed fixed on her. A small stage light shone softly on her face. She took a deep breath, remembering her mother's words, "Music comes from the heart." The event coordinator gave her an encouraging nod from the side. "You can start whenever you're ready," she said. Lily looked down at the piano, her reflection shimmering on its surface. For a second, her mind went blank. All she could think about was the fear of failing in front of everyone, of pressing the wrong key, of being laughed at again. But then, from somewhere deep inside her, a memory rose. Her mother's laughter, her soft humming, the way she used to tap Lily's tiny hands on the table like piano keys. That memory pushed away all the fear. Her fingers touched the keys one by one, soft and careful. The first note echoed through the air, and for a moment the busy mall seemed to pause. The sound was gentle, fragile, but full of warmth. People turned their heads, conversations stopped. Even the hum of machines seemed to fade. Lily began to play. Her small fingers danced across the keys with surprising grace. The melody that came out wasn't loud or showy. It was tender, full of emotion. It was a song of loneliness and hope, a song of dreams buried under years of pain but still alive. The notes rose and fell like waves, telling a story without words. Every chord she played carried a piece of her past, the nights she spent alone, the hunger, the sadness, the longing, yet, within that sorrow there was light. Her music spoke of courage, of holding on even when no one believed in you. People stood frozen, some covered their mouths. Some had tears in their eyes. A little boy whispered, "She's amazing," and his mother nodded silently. A man who had been passing by stopped walking and just stared, forgetting where he was as the music filled the air. Lily felt something change inside her. For the first time, she wasn't scared. She wasn't playing for them anymore. She was playing for her mother, for the woman who had believed in her when no one else did. She imagined her mother standing beside her, smiling proudly, humming along like she used to. The notes grew stronger, faster, filled with fire and emotion. Her hair swayed as she moved, completely lost in the music. Her small frame seemed to glow under the light. People started recording her on their phones, but Lily didn't notice. She was somewhere else, somewhere beautiful, and then silence. The final note echoed softly, fading into the air like a sigh. For a long moment, no one moved. The entire mall was still. Every pair of eyes was on the small girl sitting in front of the piano, her head slightly bowed, her fingers still resting on the keys. Then came the sound, one pair of hands clapping, then another and another, until the sound grew into a thunder of applause. Cheers filled the air. People stood up, clapping, shouting, whistling. Some cried openly, others just smiled through their tears. Lily looked up slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief. She saw hundreds of smiling faces. She saw kindness instead of mockery. She saw people moved not by pity but by something deeper. Her heart swelled so much that she almost cried. The event coordinator rushed onto the stage, beaming with pride. She put her hand on Lily's shoulder and said into the microphone, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Lily, the girl with a gift that reminds us what true music sounds like." The audience clapped even louder. The teenagers at the back looked at each other. Ashamed, one of them stepped forward, eyes lowered. He shouted, "I'm sorry for laughing at you before." His voice cracked and the crowd turned to look at him. Lily blinked in surprise but then smiled. Nodding softly, the boy smiled back, his face red. A local music teacher who had been watching from the crowd stepped forward too. She introduced herself and said, "Young lady, you have something special. I would love to teach you properly for free." Lily gasped. She couldn't believe it. "Me?" she asked softly. "Yes, you," the teacher said. "You play with heart, and that's something no one can teach. But with a little help, you can go even further." Tears filled Lily's eyes. She nodded, whispering, "Thank you," over and over. Her voice trembled, her heart racing. The crowd continued to cheer, taking pictures and videos. The mall's manager came over and told Lily that she could come play anytime she wanted, that the piano was hers now. As people started leaving, many stopped to thank her. Some dropped small notes or coins in front of the piano. One woman handed her a rose and said, "You reminded me why I used to love music." Lily sat there long after everyone had gone, her hands still resting on the keys. The mall was quiet again, but her heart was loud. She looked up at the ceiling lights and whispered softly, "Mama, they heard me." And for a moment, it felt like the whole world had stopped just to listen to her. The same girl who was once mocked for touching a piano had turned that laughter into applause. She smiled through her tears, knowing deep down that this was only the beginning. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain. From that day on, no one would ever overlook her again. Because Lily had not just played music that day. She had played her heart, and the world finally listened. The days after Lily's performance felt like living inside a dream. Everywhere she went, people seemed to recognize her. The same mall where she had once been invisible now felt like a second home. Strangers smiled when they saw her. Children waved and said, "You're the piano girl." Even the janitor who used to nod silently now greeted her warmly each morning. It was as if the world had suddenly changed its color. But for Lily, the most important change was inside her. For the first time in her life, she felt proud of who she was. She wasn't just that poor girl anymore. She was someone who had a story, a purpose, and a voice still. She remained humble, always thanking people softly, never letting her sudden fame make her forget where she came from. Every afternoon after her school chores, she would return to the mall to practice. The staff didn't stop her anymore, and they welcomed her. Some even brought her snacks or small gifts. She'd smile shyly and keep playing, filling the air with music that made people pause their busy lives for a moment. But one evening, as she was finishing her song, a man stood watching from the edge of the crowd. He was tall, with silver hair and kind eyes behind his glasses. When Lily stopped playing, he clapped gently, not too loud, just enough to make her notice. "You play beautifully," he said, his voice calm and deep. Lily blushed a little. "Thank you, sir," she said politely. Wiping her hands nervously on her skirt, the man smiled. "Do you know who I am?" Lily shook her head, confused. "No, sir," he chuckled softly. "My name is Mr. Harris. I'm a music producer. I came here because I heard about you. The girl who played from the heart." Lily's eyes widened. "A producer?" she whispered. She had only heard that word in passing, but she knew it had something to do with music. "Yes," he said kindly, "and I think you have something special. Would you like to visit my studio sometime? I'd love to record one of your songs." Lily froze. She didn't know what to say. The idea of recording her own music felt unreal. "Me? In a real studio?" she asked quietly. Mr. Harris nodded. "Yes, you, but only if you're ready." Her hands trembled as she whispered, "I'm ready." The next day, he came to the shelter to meet the caretaker and make sure everything was all right. The old lady looked surprised but happy. She said, if this is her dream, then she should go for it. That weekend, Lily walked into a music studio for the first time in her life. It was a small but cozy place filled with instruments and glowing lights. There was a giant microphone hanging from the ceiling and a huge piano in the corner. She ran her fingers over the keys and smiled. "It's so beautiful," she whispered. Mr. Harris stood nearby, watching her with pride. "Whenever you're ready, Lily," he said. Lily sat down, closed her eyes, and began to play. Her song was soft at first, then strong. It was a melody that came straight from her memories. The same song she had played in the mall, but richer now, more confident when she finished. The room was silent except for the sound of her own breathing. Mr. Harris smiled warmly. "That," he said softly, "was pure magic." He spent the next hour recording her music, guiding her gently but never changing her style. He said, "You don't play like others, Lily. You play with your soul, and that's what people will feel." After the recording, he gave her a small CD. "This is your first song," he said, handing it to her carefully. Lily held it like it was treasure. "My song," she whispered, almost in disbelief, a few days later. Mr. Harris posted a short video of Lily playing the piano on social media. He didn't expect much, just wanted people to hear her. But within hours, it started spreading again. Thousands of people watched it and comments poured in. "She plays like an angel," one wrote. "This made me cry," said another. "Someone give this girl a chance." By the next morning, her video had been shared across several countries. News outlets called her the miracle pianist. The mall where she first played was suddenly flooded with visitors hoping to hear her again. When Lily arrived that afternoon, she found the space already crowded. People holding cameras, reporters with microphones, flashing lights everywhere. She froze, overwhelmed. The noise was too much. But when she saw the piano, her fear melted away. She sat down and began to play again, ignoring the flashes, ignoring the whispers. Her music flowed like a river, washing over the crowd, silencing everyone. When she finished, there was another thunder of applause. Among the crowd was a young woman holding a picture frame. She approached Lily after the performance, tears in her eyes. "That song you played," she said softly. "It was my mother's favorite tune. She passed away last month, and hearing you play it felt like she was here again." Lily felt her throat tighten. She reached out and gently squeezed the woman's hand. "I know that feeling," she said quietly. "My mother used to listen to it too." The woman hugged her tightly, and in that moment, Lily understood something deeper. Her music wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever lost someone. Everyone who needed hope. Mr. Harris later told her, "Lily, your story is changing lives." But Lily just smiled and said, "I'm just playing what's in my heart." That night, when she returned to the shelter, she found the old lady waiting at the door. The woman smiled proudly and said, "The world finally heard you, child." Lily nodded, her eyes shining. "Yes, but it's not about being famous," she said softly. "It's about making people feel something. The way music made me feel when I had nothing. She walked to her small bed, lay down and stared at the stars outside the window. The world had called her a miracle, but she knew the truth. She wasn't magic. She was just a girl who believed in her mother's words. And as she closed her eyes, she whispered into the quiet night, "Mama, they didn't just hear me today, they felt me." Little did she know, this was only the beginning of something much bigger. The melody she carried in her heart was about to reach farther than she ever imagined. The sun was barely up, but Lily was already awake. She couldn't stop smiling as she looked at the small CD on her bedside table. Her first song, her own music, something she had created from her heart. It didn't feel real every time she saw it. She felt a rush of pride mixed with disbelief. The world had suddenly opened its doors to her, but she still felt like the same quiet girl who once stood in the corner of the mall, afraid to touch the piano. When she stepped outside that morning, the city felt different. People waved at her, some called out, "Hey, piano girl." With warm smiles, the street vendors who used to ignore her now saved her a small piece of bread. And even the bus driver greeted her kindly. It was as if her music had painted the whole city in softer colors. At the mall, a small crowd was already waiting. Children sat on the floor. Parents stood behind them, and in the center, the black piano gleamed like a friend waiting to be reunited. The mall had even placed a small golden plaque beside it that read, "Lily's Piano, a song for everyone." She touched the keys gently and smiled. "You've become famous too," she whispered playfully. A few people laughed softly from the crowd. Her presence brought warmth, not the kind from fame, but the kind that made people feel connected. She began to play, the melody slow and deep. The crowd fell silent. The sound echoed through the hall like a story being told without words. It wasn't just music anymore. It was a conversation. Between her heart and theirs. Between her pain and their understanding. After she finished, a man approached her. He was dressed neatly in a dark blue suit and held a camera. "Lily," he said, smiling. "I'm from the local news. We've been following your story. People everywhere are talking about you. Would you mind giving us a small interview?" Lily blinked nervously. "An interview? Like on TV?" He nodded. "Yes. Just tell people about your journey, your music. What inspires you?" She hesitated, her palms felt sweaty. She wasn't used to speaking in front of cameras. "I'm not very good with words," she admitted shyly. The man smiled kindly. "Then just speak from your heart. That's what people love about you." Later that day, Lily sat in front of the camera, the bright lights making her squint. She looked small in the big studio chair, but her presence filled the room. The reporter asked gently, "Lily, can you tell us what music means to you?" Lily looked down for a moment, then said softly, "Music saved me. When I had nothing, when nobody cared, it was the only thing that made me feel alive. My mom used to tell me that if you listen closely, your heart sings. I think that's what I've been doing all along." The interviewer smiled, touched by her honesty. "And how does it feel to know that millions of people are listening to that song now?" Lily's eyes widened slightly. "Millions?" she whispered. She hadn't realized how far her story had reached. "Yes," he said. "Your video has gone viral around the world. People are calling you the heart of the piano." Lily's face turned pink. She laughed softly. "I didn't know that. I just wanted to make people feel what I feel when I play. I didn't think it would go this far." The interview ended with applause from the small crew. The man said, "You're going to inspire so many children." Lily. When the segment aired that night, something incredible happened. Messages started pouring in. People from different countries, speaking different languages, all saying the same thing. They felt something when they heard her play. One message said, "Your music helped me through my hardest day," another said. "My daughter started learning piano because of you." The shelter where Lily lived was flooded with letters, drawings, and small gifts. The old lady who took care of her smiled every time she brought in another pile of envelopes. "You see, child," she said softly, "your kindness found its way back to you." But not everyone was kind. As her fame grew, a few people began to whisper. Some said she was just lucky. Others claimed it was all a stunt by the mall to attract attention. When Lily overheard two people arguing about her one afternoon, her heart sank. She wasn't angry, just hurt that evening. She sat at the piano alone after closing hours. The lights were dim and the mall was quiet. She placed her hands on the keys but didn't play. Instead, she whispered, "I didn't do it for them. I did it for Mom." And then she began to play. Not the cheerful melodies everyone loved, but something raw and haunting. The song was full of longing, the sound of a lonely heart trying to be heard in a world full of noise. The notes echoed through the empty hall. Each one felt like a tear falling into silence. When she finished, she noticed someone standing nearby. Mr. Harris, the producer. He had come quietly and listened to every note. "That," he said softly, "was the most honest thing I've ever heard." Lily looked up, her eyes glistening. "It hurts sometimes," she admitted. "People think it's all easy now, but they don't see where I came from. They don't know what it's like to feel invisible." Mr. Harris nodded. "And that's exactly why your music matters, Lily. You remind people that beauty can come from pain." He smiled gently. "How about we record that piece next?" "The one you just played," Lily hesitated. "It's too sad," she whispered. "Sad," he said, "is still beautiful." And so they recorded it. The next day, he released it online, simply titled "The Girl Who Remembered Her Mother." Within hours, it spread even faster than her first song. It reached millions. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. People could feel the truth in every note. It wasn't a happy song, but it gave comfort. It said, "You are not alone." Messages flooded in again, people sharing their stories, their pain, their hope. Lily read each one, tears in her eyes. She realized something that night. Fame fades, applause ends, but emotion lasts forever. And as she sat by her window, watching the city lights flicker like tiny stars, she whispered, "Mama, I think they finally understand." Somewhere in the soft hum of the night, she imagined her mother's voice replying, warm and proud, "I always knew they would. My little pianist." And Lily smiled because in that moment, she wasn't the poor orphan anymore. She wasn't just the piano girl. She was the voice of every heart that ever needed to be heard. Morning light spilled through the thin curtains of the shelter, painting golden stripes across the floor, where Lily sat tuning an old toy keyboard she'd found in a donation box. Her fingers moved slowly, thoughtfully. Her life had changed more in a few months than she could have ever imagined, yet she still liked the quiet mornings, the soft hum of the world before the noise of fame began again. The world now knew her as the heart of the piano. Her videos had reached millions, her songs played on radios, and her name appeared in newspapers and television interviews. But even with all the attention, Lily stayed the same shy girl with gentle eyes and a heart full of music. She still returned to the mall every evening, still smiled at the janitor, and still played for anyone who wanted to listen. One afternoon, she received a letter that made her hands tremble. It was from the National Music Foundation. They had seen her story and wanted to offer her a scholarship, full tuition to one of the best music academies in the country. For a moment, she just stared at the letter, her eyes wide. "A music school," she whispered, "for me?" The old lady who ran the shelter hugged her tightly. "You see, child, the world is opening its arms to you. You've earned it." That night, Lily sat by her window, the city lights twinkling below. She held the letter to her chest and whispered, "Mama, I'm going to study music and really study it." Her heart felt like it was glowing. A week later, Lily arrived at the academy for her first day. The building was huge, with tall windows and echoing hallways filled with the sound of instruments. She felt small walking through the entrance, clutching her backpack and her heart. Everywhere she looked, there were students dressed neatly, carrying expensive violins, flutes, and sheet music. Some looked at her curiously, whispering to each other, "Isn't that the girl from the internet?" One of them said, "She's that viral pianist," another replied. Half impressed, half skeptical, Lily tried to smile, but she could feel their eyes judging her. Her worn shoes, her simple clothes, her nervous posture. She reminded herself that she had been through worse, that she had faced laughter before. In her first class, the instructor, a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, asked each student to play a short piece. When it was Lily's turn, she hesitated. Her classmates had performed complex classical pieces flawlessly. She didn't know how to read all the notes perfectly yet. She only knew how to feel them. She sat down at the grand piano, took a deep breath, and began to play her own melody, one that came from memory, from emotion, from everything she had lived. The room fell silent. Even the strict instructor stood still, watching her fingers move like poetry across the keys. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before the teacher said softly, "That was extraordinary." You don't play like a student. You play like someone who's lived. From that day, Lily became the heart of the academy. Even the students who once doubted her began asking her for advice. How do you make it sound like that? One boy asked. I play the same notes. But mine sound empty. Lily smiled shyly. You have to mean it, she said simply. When you play, think of someone you love. Someone you miss, that's where the music hides. Weeks passed. And Lily's talent only grew. She composed new pieces that made people cry. She even began writing lyrics short and full of feeling. Mr. Harris, who still guided her like a mentor, visited one afternoon and listened to her new song. This one's different, he said. It's brighter. It sounds like hope, Lily nodded, smiling. It's called New Dawn, she said. I wrote it for all the kids in the shelter. I want them to know there's always a way out. If you keep believing, Mr. Harris smiled proudly. Then let's share it with the world. He recorded the song and released it online again. Within days, New Dawn spread everywhere. It wasn't just music. It was a message. Schools played it during assemblies. Radio hosts dedicated it to dreamers. And thousands of people shared stories of how it inspired them. One evening, the mall where it had all begun held a special event in her honor. The banner read, From the Streets to the Stars, a tribute to Lily. The piano was polished to a shine, surrounded by flowers and lights. As Lily walked onto the small stage, the crowd erupted in applause. There were families, reporters, students, and even the teenagers who had once mocked her. This time they stood proudly holding a sign that said, We're sorry, Lily, and we're proud of you. Tears filled her eyes as she waved at them. Thank you, she said softly. You were part of my story too. When she sat down at the piano, she didn't play a sad song this time. She played New Dawn, her fingers gliding confidently. The music soared through the air, bright, powerful, and full of life. The crowd swayed with it, some clapping softly, some crying quietly. Halfway through, Lily looked up at the empty space above her, where she imagined her mother watching. Smiling as always, she whispered under her breath, This is for you, and continued playing when the final note echoed. The entire mall stood up in a roaring ovation. The sound of applause was so strong that it filled every corner. Lily stood, bowing with tears in her eyes. The woman who had once been invisible, mocked, and forgotten had now become a light for others. After the performance, a little girl approached her shyly, holding a small drawing of a piano. I want to play like you someday, the girl said softly. But my family can't afford lessons. Lily knelt down, took the girl's hand, and smiled. You don't need fancy lessons to start. You just need to listen, and not to the piano, but to your heart. Promise me you'll keep listening. The little girl nodded eagerly, and Lily gave her a gentle hug. That night, when Lily returned home, she stood by her window again. Looking at the city glowing below, she thought about how far she had come. From being a lonely girl who couldn't even touch a piano to becoming a symbol of courage and hope. She whispered softly, Mama, I think this is what you meant, listening to my heart. And as she drifted to sleep, she dreamed not of applause or fame, but of a world filled with music. A world where every lost child could find their song, just like she had found hers. A soft wind carried the scent of spring through the city. The sun hung low in the sky, painting everything gold, and the streets buzzed with energy. But in the middle of all the sound and color, Lily sat quietly by her window. Holding a letter in her hands, her heart was beating fast. The envelope had an elegant seal, the emblem of the International Youth Music Festival. She unfolded it slowly, her eyes moving across the neat lines of text. We are honored to invite Lily, the heart of the piano, to perform as the closing act at the Grand Hall in New York City. Alongside world-renowned musicians, her hands shook, and tears welled in her eyes. She covered her mouth in disbelief, whispering, Mama, they want me to play. Around the world, the very idea felt unreal. She remembered those cold evenings at the mall, when she stood too scared to touch the piano because people laughed at her. And now, she was being invited to perform on one of the biggest stages in the world. When she told the old lady at the shelter, the woman's eyes filled with tears. Oh, child, she said softly, you've turned your pain into something beautiful. Go. Show the world who you are. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Passports, rehearsals, interviews, it all felt like a dream. But through it all, Lily stayed grounded. She didn't care about fame or cameras. She only cared about her music. She practiced day and night, pouring her heart into a new piece, one she called The Song That Changed Everything. It was a blend of all her emotions: sadness, courage, love, and hope. When the day of the concert finally came, the grand hall was breathtaking. It shimmered with light, and thousands of people filled the seats. The stage looked enormous, the piano standing in the center under a single spotlight. Musicians from different countries performed before her. Each performance was grand, polished, professional. But when it was Lily's turn, the room fell into a hush. She walked on stage slowly, her small frame almost swallowed by the vast space. Yet her presence carried something powerful, a quiet strength that made everyone lean forward in their seats. She sat down at the piano, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. For a moment she heard nothing but the soft beating of her heart. Then she whispered under her breath, "For you, Mama." The first note broke the silence like dawn breaking after a long night. It was delicate, pure, and full of emotion. The melody began slow, almost fragile, but then grew stronger. Her fingers danced gracefully, telling her story through every chord. The audience watched, mesmerized. They didn't just hear her music, and they felt it. Each note painted a picture: a small girl standing alone in a mall, the laughter that once hurt her, the courage that made her play anyway, the applause that changed her life, and the love that never left her heart. The song rose higher, brighter, and suddenly the music turned gentle again. The kind of sound that makes you close your eyes and remember everything good in your life. Some people in the crowd began to cry quietly. One woman whispered to her husband, "It feels like she's speaking to my soul." And then came the final note, soft, long, and full of peace. When it faded, the silence was so deep that you could hear a breath catch. Lily kept her eyes closed for a few seconds longer, afraid to open them, afraid the magic would vanish. But when she finally looked up, the hall exploded in applause. People stood to their feet, cheering, clapping, some even shouting her name. Cameras flashed like stars, but all Lily saw was the light, warm and golden, and she smiled through her tears. A famous conductor came on stage, bowed to her, and said into the microphone, "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we didn't just hear music. We witnessed a miracle. This young girl reminded us that greatness doesn't come from fame or wealth. It comes from the heart." Lily stood and bowed deeply, her eyes glistening. For a moment she thought she saw her mother standing in the crowd. Smiling proudly, her heart swelled, and she whispered again, "Mama, we did it." After the concert, reporters flooded her with questions, but Lily only said one thing: "I just played what I felt. Music saved me when I was lost, and I hope it saves someone else too." That night, when she returned to her hotel room, she placed her hand over the piano keys once more and smiled. She could still hear the echo of the applause, but more than that, she could feel peace. She wasn't chasing success anymore. She had found her purpose. Weeks later, she returned home to the shelter. She walked in quietly, carrying her small backpack. The old lady looked up in surprise. "You're back?" she said. Lily nodded, smiling. "Home is where my music began." In the evening, she visited the mall again. The same piano still stood there. Polished and waiting, she sat down, took a deep breath, and began to play the song that changed everything. The crowd that gathered wasn't huge this time, just ordinary people. Families, workers, and a few children, but that didn't matter. For Lily, this was the most special performance of all. Halfway through the song, a little girl stepped forward from the crowd. Her clothes were old, her eyes wide with wonder. She looked just like Lily once had. Can I try?" she asked timidly. Lily stopped playing and smiled warmly. She stood up and motioned for the girl to sit. "Of course," she said softly. "Go ahead. The piano's for everyone." The girl pressed a key and giggled at the sound. The crowd chuckled softly, and Lily placed a gentle hand on the child's shoulder. "You see," she said quietly, "that's how it begins. One note, one dream." As the girl played her first simple melody, Lily looked up at the ceiling, her heart full. She could almost hear her mother's voice again, whispering in the music, "See, my little one?" The song never ends, and Lily smiled because she knew her mother was right. The song that once began with pain and loneliness had now turned into something eternal, something that would live on in others. That evening, as the mall lights dimmed and the last notes faded into silence, the crowd clapped softly, not with thunder but with warmth. The little girl grinned. Lily laughed softly, and together they pressed the final note, a gentle golden sound that seemed to say, dreams don't die. They just find new hands to play them.